I would love if you could tell me about one of your favorite plant breeding projects.
All right. And I have some slides for you on this one.
Amazing.
I'm going to share my screen. I've got 4 slides. Um, Come on, share. Okay. So, my favorite plant breeding project is one. So, I have a lot of different plant breeding projects, but and some of them have been accidental, but this is one that was intentional. So, this project began in, I believe, 2008 or 2009. And what I wanted was I wanted to cross a black radish. So, what you see on the right, which is black on the outside and white on the inside, with a watermelon radish is what you see on the left, which is greenish white on the outside and like a really nice pink on the inside. And I just thought it'd be so cool to have a black skinned radish with a pink inside. And I grew out. So at harvest time, I overwintered, or actually, I'm not even sure. I decided on this in the winter, and I already had some of these roots in storage. And so I planted out maybe 6 roots of each. So a smallish amount side by side. I made a patch of 6 roots of black radish, a patch of 6 roots of watermelon radish. I let them go to flower. And what was interesting is they actually didn't go to flower at the same time. I think the watermelon was much earlier than the black radish. So there's just a brief period where they were in flower together, where they synced. And so most of the pollination on the watermelon radishes was just watermelon radish pollinating itself, and most of the pollination of the black radish was just black radish pollinating itself. And and so I wasn't sure how much cross pollination there actually was. And what I did is I harvested the seed from the watermelon radish separate from the seed from the black radish. And the next year I grew out a row of each of them. And in fact, most of the watermelon radish were watermelon radish, and most of the black radish were black radish. But I also got a dozen or so, or I guess this amount of radishes that were clearly different from the parents, and I could see the traits of those parents.
Uh-huh.
This is not what I was expecting. This was the F1 generation. It's a little bit ugly, but it was definitely interesting, and I had never seen something like this. And I saved the F1 seed, and or I dug up the F1 roots. I kept them to the winter, and the next year I just grew them together, and I let the F1 cross up. And then the following year, I grew that seed out, and then this is what I got. So I got a
Ooh.
range of radishes from like white on the outside to white on the inside, and then it was like pink on the outside and white on the inside, or pink on the outside and pink on the inside. And then this is the
And
thing.
Dan, sorry, that was the F1. You let it cross up, but just among those
Yes.
plants.
I
Okay.
let the F1 cross within itself.
Okay.
And, I did not have any other radishes adding to this. But then the F2, so these 2 slides are the diversity that was coming the F2 immediately. And so you can see there's all these segregating genes showing all this potential, like so much potential. And there was, in fact, these black skinned radishes, and you can see they kind of have red through them. And I was afraid to cut it right through the heart because I needed to overwinter it. So I kept the ones that were the blackest and the ones that had red inside them, and then I overwintered them and grew them out. And the next year, there was still diversity, but there was more of that black skin and red. And I did that for, I don't know, 10 years or so. And with sometimes I had some problems overwintering, sometimes some bad growing seasons, but it took about 10 years. And this is what I got to. So on the left is the beginning, a black radish with white on the inside. In the middle is what I was going for,
Yeah.
and which I was so thrilled. But something I didn't expect is there's all these purples that started showing up. I think that pinkish combination in the watermelon radish has a bunch of purple genes in there, and when they got separated out, well, they became purple. And so on the far right is something I did not expect at all. And so this is my goal was the middle, which we call our black crimson radish, which I love and I'm proud of. But the black amethyst radish on the far right is something
Mm.
I didn't expect, and it just blew me away. And it's one that people really, that's also one that resonates with everybody who sees it. So this is my favorite breeding project, and it's really exciting. And at this point, it's maybe like 80% stable. And so when I grow out, I bet I get a lot of these, and I'm always like, we're selling these seeds at this point.
Yeah.
But there's when I grow them out, there's still some that are like so purple on the inside, and then there's some that are less, and then some that barely. And so when we overwinter a bunch, and then the next year we cut. So this picture is when we're cutting into them in the spring to see what they look like in the inside to make sure we're planting out the best. And
Mhm.
so we grow out the stuff that is the best we call our A lot, and then stuff that's decent we call the B lot, and then stuff that is not as good but almost there, is the C lot. And when we're planting it, we plant the A lot together and then the B lot beside it. And if we need to have enough roots, we'll plant the C lot. And so when we're harvesting the seed that we're going to regrow, we only harvest from the A lot. But when they're harvesting seed that we're going to sell out, we're going to sell to other people. We're harvesting from the A, the B, and maybe the C if we need it. And
Okay.
so we're always, the best is always becoming next year's stock seed, and
Mhm.
then the next best is what we're selling now. And so every year we're selling a better batch than or every year that we grow it out, we're selling a better batch than the previous year that we grew it out. Um,
Did you do taste evaluations?
I have done taste evaluations, and there's a range of flavor in it. So none of them are as so the black radish is very spicy. None of them are as spicy as the black radish. The watermelon radish is fairly sweet, with a little bit of edge of heat. And there are individuals that are as sweet as that, but not all of them. And it's something it's tough to go through like 200 radishes and taste them all, because we are handling hundreds of radishes. And um, we might be at that point where that's what we start doing with the A's, because there's enough of them coming through. But up until now, it's been the colors have been the priority, and the good flavor has been in the population, so I haven't been worried about it. It's not like something that,
Yeah.
like, there have been some stuff that I've grown out selected for looks, and then you get to tasting like, oh wow, there's nothing special about it, or it's not good. And
Yeah.
this one is at least good with exceptional individuals in there. And so it's something that we could move to, but it's going to require a lot of tasting of radishes.
Yeah. That's a lot of radish to eat. Do you think so when you do a breeding project like this based mostly around like a really cool color combo, what kind of like who does that resonate with? Are you seeing like market customers really excited about it? Are you seeing gardeners who really want to get the seed because they want to grow that in like who is really taken by the results of this project?
Um, so so if your question is broad, like when we're doing fancy colors and new things, who's interested in it? But I would maybe just bring that back to the radish. Um, so there's a potential for everyone to be interested in it, but there's a lot of people who just see on the market stall a black radish, or at the CSA, and that's not specifically what they're excited about. However, if I were to cut it open and show it to them, they're going to be more excited. And then if I tell them, oh, this is something that we created ourselves and nobody else has this unless they got seed from us, that's
Mhm.
even more exciting. And if we explain the process that this is 10 or 12 years to get here. So in the case of like with the winter radish, like it's uphill, right? Because you're dealing with winter radishes, which are not, it's not like you have a fancy new tomato or a pepper or like the hottest hot pepper ever, which like that is a specific thing for a specific niche of people. So there's a potential to sell it. The looks, people are, when they see the inside, they find it stunning, and then when they hear the story, that helps even more.
Absolutely.
And specifically in the case of the winter radish.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so cool. What a cool project. Um, Thank you so much for sharing. Did you have a bit more to say on this? I think you said you
No,
had.
this is pretty
Okay,
much it.
yeah.
Like
Okay.
I could talk forever about. Well, what I would say, the
Yeah.
other thing I would say,
Yep.
is going back to here. There is so much diversity, that I actually have had a number of other breeding projects in here too, right? Like I had
Okay.
some that were more focusing on purples or focusing on pinks, and I've added into this population also some longer radishes. And there's one called green meat, or I think green luobo, which is like white on the outside and green on the inside, that I've tried to cross in also with this. And that's actually had been mixed, because what I've discovered is the green isn't so much, it's like, it seems to be more of like a tint of the white flesh as opposed to like a distinct green flesh like you see with the red flesh here. So I've had mixed results, but I do have a whole range of other radishes I've been working with too. So there's like these secondary projects that emerge from this. And then the limiting factor is really the isolation distances. So that's the other thing I would say about this.
Yeah, that's cool. You can start to really see the potential in those in that kind of F1, F2 generation with what comes out of it. That's
Hmm.
very cool. Okay. Okay, great. So you grow in Quebec at Tournesol Farm. What do you think is the particular value of learning how to breed plants on farm for folks who are in Eastern Canada, Atlantic Canada, maybe arguably more marginal farming climates?
I think there's two values. So one is, I mean, you kind of hinted at it when you say marginal farming climates, is by breeding and selecting in different climates, you're adapting to them. And so we'll definitely see crops get earlier just by being selected for. And then and like, because breeding is broad, right? As a topic, breeding can be, I take two different things and cross it to get a lot of genetic diversity and select out something different or something that looks similar but is different. Or I can just take, a pepper and grow 200 plants of it and choose the best 10 or 15 and do that over and over. So those are both breeding. And people tend to think of the other one more as plant breeding. But just the process that we do as seed keepers and as seed farmers of growing a larger population and then choosing the better ones, that's also breeding. And so things get earlier. Things, if you pay attention, you can have things that are more disease resistant. And then also cold hardiness. I think those are three things that we can really select for. Um, the potential has to exist within the gene pool that you're working with, but generally you'll go in that direction. And then if you're crossing very different varieties together, you have even more potential for that. So I think that's one thing that's really exciting. And then the other part is creating varieties that is distinctly yours and
Mm.
that become part of your farm story and that you can share on social media. You can put in your newsletter. You can talk about our market. You can talk about with your CSA clients. And I think that is really, so it could be looked as a marketing niche of having something that's different, but it's also just a way to tell your story another way. And I think that's a real value that can strengthen your farm even more than more adapted seeds can.
Awesome. Okay, great. Oh, and I did have another question that I didn't get to ask when we were talking about your breeding project, but you said that you worked on the turnips or sorry, the radishes for about 10 years, and now
Yeah.
you've got something that's, you're still continually working on it. It's about 80% stable. Would you say that's typical of one of your breeding projects, that timeline?
Um, yes, there is a real distinction when you're dealing with selfers or crossers.
Mm,
So with the crosser, it is really hard to get it to 100% because there's all these secret genes in there that just keep popping up. With a sulfur, within 6 to 8 years, you can have something that's really stable.
mm,
And so we have some hot pepper projects that, I mean, there's diversity for sure, but I think to the untrained eye, they don't see that diversity. I mean, to me, it just screams the diversity, but to someone who's not looking for it, they might not notice it. But with the crosser, for sure, that diversity is really hard to get rid of, especially without bottlenecking the genetics of the population. Because like I could take my five favorite, like a really small population, and work with it. Um, to eliminate out the ones that I don't that are having the genes I don't want in it. But I'm worried about getting too narrow with that.
Yeah, of course. And presumably you want like a good amount of diversity in what
Yeah,
you're
I would
for.
like a little bit less. I'd like to have 3% diversity, but this is still acceptable.
Okay. All right, that's great. That's really helpful. Okay, so what do you think is the biggest issue facing farmer plant breeders right now?
I've got two issues. One is more of an outside issue and like the larger context, and it's I think we're on the cusp of genetic engineering or so many varieties being available with that to home gardeners with genetically engineered genes. Um, and the one that there's a purple tomato that came out from it's called from Norfolk Plant Sciences in the last 2 years, and it's
Mhm.
like it's gorgeous. It's like I think it's Snapdragon genes that they use, and it's like purple. It's not like a black. It's not like what we call purple, but it's purple.
Actually,
So
I've seen pictures of it. It's actually purple. Yeah.
yeah, and so this is something that um, you could come home, take to your house, and you can start saving the seed and sharing it everywhere. And I think, and then, and I've seen on online forums people want to start doing breeding projects with it, and so these genes start to emerge into the population, and I think we're going to see more and more of that. So I like, I mean, and maybe you don't care. Maybe that's like, yes, I can't wait to have more purple tomatoes, no matter how they're there. But if you're concerned about this, just the spreading of genetically engineered genes, and you want to preserve OPs, open pollinated varieties, like I think this is something that's going to take more attention to be paid to the stuff the varieties you're working with, and it's something that kind of freaks me out. I'm very curious what's going to happen, but I think things are going to change. So that's one challenge. The other challenge is or issue is more related to your farm, and I think to get the best results, you have to grow a lot of plants. And when you grow a lot of plants, you see more diversity and you see more chance of seeing exceptional individuals. Um, and if you have 1 or 2 acres of farm, it's hard to go and grow 200 or 300 pepper plants or 1,000 radishes um, and so that can be a challenge that can limit the potential you have unless you have a market for it. So if you like with these radishes, all the off types can go into a CSA basket. Like
Yeah.
we eat them. They're not, so it's no wasted space. There is a lot of seed that gets produced at different parts in this, but in terms of the vegetables, like there's not really wasted space that happens with that. And like we do a lot of pepper breeding projects, and again, we can move the peppers through. Um, where where I've faced a challenge multiple times is cucurbits, and with cucurbits, if you cross two different squash, you don't know what they're going to taste like. I was doing some work trying to cross a delicata with a spaghetti. They were really
Mhm.
stunning, but they weren't always fibrous like a spaghetti squash. They weren't always solid. So if I have 300 of these extra squash, it's hard to move them. Like mystery squash isn't as satisfying as squash that you know. And
Agreed. Yeah.
no, they're edible. They're not toxic and nothing like that. But it's just it's hard to move them along, and so that's been a problem. I keep dabbling with cucurbits and then moving away because I just can't grow enough plants in a way that makes sense with the space that we have.
Mm.
So that's the other issue I think that farmers have is or farmer plant breeders is how to find a way to grow enough plants that makes financial sense on your farm in 1 year and in many years. I mean, sometimes just growing a lot of plants 1 year is fine, and then you can have a smaller amount. But often growing more plants every year is just going to help you out.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, that's such a practical concern. Um, okay, great. Last question, my favorite. Dan, what piece of advice would you give to a grower embarking on their very first plant breeding project, or perhaps someone who has an idea for a plant breeding project but isn't quite sure how to approach it yet?
Um, I think my advice is like for someone who's just a little bit into the project. It's not necessarily the getting started, but the kind of the next steps, or maybe a little bit the getting started. So, and I have two pieces again of advice, and one is think about how you're going to evaluate if you see what you want, and like you can have an idea what for a plant breeding project, but you need to be able to see if it's going in that direction. So, like with these radishes that we showed, to get to see if I cut it in half, the radish is not going to be able to continue growing. So if I want to see the inside of what the color is and I cut it all the way through, it's going to stop growing. If it was a carrot, it would keep growing because carrots is an actual true root, whereas radishes are stem tissue. So I kind of cut a slit in to see, and I have to go deep enough to see. So that's kind of like a plan of how I want to see what's happening. Um, with the squash again, like if I have 300 squash, I'm going to have to cut them all and see the inside of what they look like to evaluate them. And if you love eating squash and you eat hundreds of squash through the winter, well then maybe you just bring them in and you want to mark each squash individually from what plant it came from, and then you cook it. If it tastes great, you keep the seed, and you can also see how long it stores. But you have to have a strategy of how you're going to do it. And something with the squash also that gets tricky. Some of those big sprawling plants, sometimes you can't tell what came from what plant, and it becomes a whole mess, and you don't know what's going on. So that's just kind of to think about how you're going to evaluate the crop is one thing. And the other thing is you will likely begin to see you have 1 million choices you can make. And you need to know how to make choices and narrow down the selections. And so I showed some radish picture, or so the radish picture, there's probably at least 8 different phenotypes in there and maybe more. So I could have taken 8 breeding projects. And then
Mm.
as they start to stabilize, maybe I'll see even more coming out of it. And I don't have enough space to do all of that or enough time. And it's something I had a problem with lettuces. I was doing some lettuce crosses about 15 years ago, and I'd crossed a red oak leaf with a what was the other one? It was a small green something. I can't remember what it was, but I got so much diversity, and it was like there were 30 or 40 different plants that didn't look like anything else, and how to keep them. And ultimately I gave up on the lettuce because it overwhelmed me. I think now I went back and that seed no longer germinates, and I was disappointed. Now I'm more equipped. And the things I would look at, is the taste. Does it taste good? I would probably try to grow, if I was in early years of a lettuce breeding, I would grow it probably outdoors so there's more disease pressure. And I would really look at what does well disease wise. And then
Mm.
in terms of things different, I would really look for what I find stunning, not just what I find like quirky or interesting, And so and that's, I think, when you're becoming a farmer plant breeder, part of the journey is learning about how to be judicious. And you're going to have to, at first it's going to be hard to know how to make that choices, and you're going to keep more stuff than you can manage. And but over time you start making decisions and start seeing, maybe I really didn't really want to keep that. It's not that great. Why did I grow it for 4 years? And and you get better at shutting projects down and just keeping less lines. And that's a really important thing, is learn how to make those choices. I've heard in writing the expression "kill your darlings." It's just, and so I think that goes for this case too. And I think it's better to grow something, with a larger population size that you really love, than a lot of small things with small population sizes that you don't care that much about, other than the fact that they're new and exciting.
Right. Right. Absolutely fantastic. Dan, thanks so much. You shared just a whole lot of wisdom in a very short time, and I really appreciate the prep that you put into this conversation. All I did was think about 4 questions. You prepped some very like coherent and wise answers, and I think all of that is going to be just really appreciated.
Can I take this opportunity then to do a little promo?
Yes, please. Yeah.
So I have, so all the seeds that we sell, you can find on what is our website? Tournesol.qc.ca. If you search Tournesol, you'll find us. So we do sell the seeds, but I have a book coming up called The Seed Farmer. It's being released. Well, it's coming out. I have a book coming out shortly by November 26th, and I do talk about some of these breeding projects and other breeding stuff. And I also host a podcast called The Seed Farmer, where I talk with other seed growers and farmers about, about growing seed, but also their breeding projects. So I think the viewers should go out and check those things out.
Absolutely fantastic. Okay, I'm gonna let you go. I know you're super busy. Thank you so much, Dan. I'll be back in touch when I have a finished thing to show you. We'll talk soon.
Bye.
Bye.